My name is Natalie Tomanchek, and this is our video reflection 3. So, a little introduction. Across weeks 6 through 8, we studied how cities grow, adapt, and affect the people living in them. Um, Jacobs showed us that cities are complex and human-centered. Gell explores how design influences social life, and Burgess analyzes the social organization of city growth. And together, these readings revealed to us how urban planning needs to balance structure with the human experience, and also that urban life is complex and it grows from community interaction, not top-down control. So, in Jacob's piece of writing that we looked at, we got some key points out of it, some of which include that she argued that cities are problems of organized complexity, not simple systems, that urban life works best when there is diversity, mixed uses, and interactions. She targeted and further challenged planners that simplify city life, and she explained how real neighborhoods thrive best when people shape them from the ground up. And then an additional source that we found that kind of relates to Jacob's piece of writing was Jeff Speck's Walkable City, and it kind of just continued her ideas, but in a more modern context. And he shows us how walkability makes cities safer and more connected, which kind of echoed her belief that cities thrive when they're designed around people rather than vehicles. And including this source in our presentation kind of helped tie Jacob's ideas to today's urban challenges and some solutions.
Hi, my name is Valen Weatherford, and I'm doing week 6 Remembering Jane Jacobs video. She was writing about what made a neighborhood interesting and safe. She wanted to have wide boulevards for cars and grass around all the houses and to have separate uses, but Jane told them no, and that may not look good to their aesthetics, but all the older buildings actually have remarkable results to society. An area in New York that was run down got turned into a modern area with lots of walkways and a fountain, but it turned out to be not better for people and it didn't work. But Jane saw this evidence and put it all into her book that changed the way the world thought about it. Her book changed a lot of things about urbanism over time. Back when the book came out, it was very radical thinking, and now it is just the basics. Robert Moses was a man that created many new things, but Jane was the person to stop him from making a 6-lane highway that would have changed a lot for New York and would have taken down a neighborhood. My outside source is Project for Public Spaces, Jane Jacobs. This article explains more of Jane Jacobs' life and how she had the influence that she did. She was an urban writer and activist who worked on new community based approaches to planning for over 40 years. She had no professional training in city planning. She says how her previous jobs gave her more of a notion of what was going on in the city and what business was like, what work was like. She approached cities as living beings and ecosystems. She advocated for mixed use urban development. She challenged the usual way of city planning that depended on outside experts, arguing that people who live in the community know best how to improve it. While traditional planning ideas blamed crowded areas for crime, dirt, and other issues, Jacobs provided that Jacobs proved that having many people close together actually helps cities thrive and grow. By studying how cities and their economies develop, Jacobs helped people better understand how local economies really work.
Howdy, y'all. My name is Jonathan Trevino, and I chose to do week seven's topic, which was Cities for People, chapters 1 and 2. Starting off with chapter 1, the main points that we can see that are emphasized in chapter 1, Gill highlights how planners should design cities that prioritize human experience, namely walking, standing, sitting, viewing, listening, and interacting. He also criticizes post-World War II urban planning, stating that it focuses too heavily on buildings and cars while neglecting the needs of pedestrians, these needs being things such as public transportation and more walkable cities. He also mentions the issue of urban spaces becoming less conducive to natural social interaction, which could lead to social isolation. He ultimately emphasizes that cities should be designed with limitations and abilities of the human body in mind. And a noteworthy quote that I found um, in this article, or not in the article, but in chapters 1 and 2, was We shape our cities and they shape us. Now, as for Chapter Two's key themes, Gell delves into how sight lines, noises, and physical proximity influence human comfort and use of public space. He explains that there's three types of unique distances. There's intimate distance, which is 0 up to 1.2 meters, which is family and close friends. Then you have social distance, which is 1.2 to 3.5 meters, which is just typically for conversations. And then you have public distances, which is beyond 3.5 meters. This is for observation without interaction. Now, small scale elements such as benches, lighting, and textures shape how welcoming a space can feel. In addition, moving around encourages interaction and observation of the surrounding environment, whereas driving limits how much one can observe and interact with. As for my external source, I chose an article titled Psychology of Scale, People, Buildings, and Cities. The article spotlights how numerous modern cities have neglected the human aspect in urban design, building gigantic structures, large distances, prioritizing cars and speed, rather than citizens and slower movement. I mentioned this earlier when I said that they don't emphasize walkable cities and public transportation. In addition to this article also happens to emphasize how humans have limited horizontal visual fields. We have a limited ability to look far up, and that beyond 5 stories, a building becomes disconnected from street life because it's out of our sensory range. This article also argues that massive, impersonal built structures create cold, impersonal, and formal environments where public life is harmed. Additionally, the article also proposes that cities can have high density, but they have an obligation to preserve human scale, at least at the ground level. Finally, we see that the article states that the experience of comfort and well-being in cities is closely linked to how city structure and city space harmonizes with the human body, human senses, and corresponding space dimensions and scale. Thank you.
Howdy, my name is Victoria Nowell, and I summarize the growth of the city in Introduction to a Research Project by Ernest W. Burgess. Burgess used Chicago as an example of how cities expand and are socially organized. During this experiment, the concentric zone model was introduced, which shows cities grow outwards in rings from the downtown core. They also believed that growth in cities brings progress in organizations and the opportunity and disorganization in crime, poverty, and moral instability. Burgess also pioneered urban ecology, aka the applying of scientific observation and mapping to social life. Another one of the key focuses of the growth of the city is the 5 concentric zones. The first zone is a central business district, which is the economic, political, and cultural center of the city. The second is a zone in transition, which is declining housing, factories, immigrant/slum area. The third is a working class zone, which is for the stable labor neighborhoods. Fourth is the residential zone, which is for the middle/upper class apartments and homes. And finally, the commuter zone, which is for the suburbs and satellite towns. Thank you.
Conclusion: Understanding cities as living systems. In conclusion, weeks 6 through 8 show that cities are living and constantly changing systems shaped by the people who live in them. Jacobs, Gell, and Burgess each explain that urban life grows through human connection and community rather than strict planning or control. Together, their ideas show that successful cities develop from the bottom up through the daily interactions and relationships of their residents.